This is my sunroom in my apartment in Elizabeth Bay. When I used to do photography, I would often use the Romance Was Born clothing, get into the archives and dress the models I was shooting. I wouldn't call myself a photographer. I think I've just been collecting an archive of work for the past 15 years. And it felt like at the time I was just piling stuff up. And then now I have this giant archive that I just dip into at any point and pull out and mix and cut up and put back together and dye and paint on top of. And the whole process opened up for me. So I ended up with what I've been doing now. My practice has shifted quite a lot in the last couple of years. I went to Paris last year for a 3-month residency, and while I was there I decided I didn't want to make work how I was making work. I was really bored of like taking photos, and even at that point I was collaging and I was still struggling with that. And I'd been practicing with these new techniques for about 5 years, experimenting. But something happened in Paris where I decided to just stop altogether. And so I decided that if I was going to make work, it would have to be like gardening, because I'm from a farm and I have a garden there that I go and visit and work on whenever I'm there. And it's the thing I love the most. And I didn't know how that would happen, but the studio in Paris had a giant pinboard that was maybe like 5 meters long and went from floor to ceiling. And so one day I went to a really cheap, like crappy print shop, and I printed maybe 500 A3 images and all my collages and everything. And I just started cutting them all up and I just pinned them all across the room. And that became like the process of gardening for me. I started dyeing the prints, getting dyes and painting on top, sometimes scanning, re-dyeing, printing, making it just a more involved experience for myself. The exhibition that I held at UNSW Galleries this year was a direct result of the experience I had in Paris, and I had worked very hard making that show happen, but unfortunately the day it opened was also the day it closed because of the COVID-19 shutdown. And then the show got locked away for 2 months, which I really loved the idea of it being entombed for that whole period. I can redo the show now and I can add all the new elements I've learnt from having these 4 or 5 months to just sit at home and work and experiment. So I would say that my work has shifted. Normally what would have taken me 10 years has shifted in 5 months completely. So the work I've been making at home, I've kind of been making mini versions of the large show. It's kind of like miniature walls. And you'll see when you see the documentation of the show and what I've been making. It's kind of a similar vibe, but much more detail. I really love the idea of my work being reinterpreted, kind of like open source. So I get to experience my work through someone else's eyes and then go back and reinterpret that. So I'm learning. It's like a feedback loop in a way. I met Luke and Anna one night at the Cricketers Arms Hotel, and it was a Christmas party, and we all partied on there. I came to Paris in 2018. Luke and Anna asked me to take photos and do some collages of the collection they were presenting there. And so I went and hung out with them in Paris for a while, and a lot of the work made over that period has become part of this collection that we've collaborated on. I literally put together a Dropbox folder that had maybe 1,000 images in it and just sent it off. And then they went through and just chose out their favorites. I'm really relaxed with that stuff because it's all mine and I wouldn't put it out if I didn't like it. So everything is okay. Everything is fine to use. I'm not super precious. There's this thing that happens, I think, when you make something, it's like, it's out of my hands. And I think it's really nice to let other people reinterpret what you've done. And it just has another life. It goes off into another dimension. It's in the multiverse where it's now on a dress. And I really love that.